Let's face it, if you're a creative person, money is difficult to talk about. We align so much of our value as creative people with what we do that talking about money, what we charge, what we think we should be charging, is very aligned with how much we think we're worth. I want to dispel that a little bit later, but the reality is it's important to talk about money. Money is a thing that is going to drive your career. It's going to enable you to take risks. It's going to help you flourish. It's going to make your business work for you instead of you working for your business. I've had a lot of students ask me about pricing, and it really depends. There's a number of factors, but I want to give you a definitive guide from my opinion of what I think you should be charging. We're going to talk about what factors actually influence your pricing in the first place, and I'm also going to give you 2 formulas that I think will help you to calculate some base rates for yourself later in the video. So the first question people often ask is, should I be charging per hour of my time, per minute of music, or per project? Hourly pricing is very common for a lot of professions, but is not always a great pick for a creative career. The reason is twofold. If you're charging per hour, a client often doesn't know what that means and what they should expect to pay. If they're expecting 5 minutes of music from you and you charge per hour, they don't know if it's going to take you 50 hours, 5 hours, and so there's a bit of uncertainty and potential conflict in that. The other problem is it's very difficult to scale your hourly pay because you're going to get faster. As you get faster writing music, the result is it's going to take you less hours and therefore you'll be paid less. So charging per hour is not the most effective way, in my opinion, to actually grow your income. The way I have done it for many years now is charging per minute of music. Charging per minute is great because as I get faster, I get incentivized for my speediness. I get paid more per hour because I'm charging per minute. The other thing is it's really clear and easy. You get nice clean numbers. If you're charging 200 per minute of music and they want 5 minutes of music, there's $1,000 right there. Both parties know what to expect. It's very clear and concise. Charging per project can work, but often usually boils down to charging per minute of music in my case. So I tend to just lean towards per minute. If you want to do package deals and offer discounts with projects, you can, but ultimately I recommend per minute. Now let's say you've decided you want to charge per minute. The next question inevitably is, how much should I charge per minute? As I'm sure you've seen, pricing scales dramatically. You have people that might be charging $50 per minute. You might have people that are charging $5,000 per minute or higher. The beauty is that there's really no end to how much you can scale your pricing, and these factors are going to influence that. The first factor is going to be how much experience you have. Naturally, if you don't have a lot of experience, you're just getting into the industry, it's going to be difficult for you to charge a lot. It's going to be difficult for you to convince people of your value. And that's a big secret that we're going to get into later. The next factor is how in demand you are. It's tied closely with your experience, but as you have more demand, people will begin to reach out to you, asking you to compose for them. And that gives you a lot of bargaining power. People want you to compose. You're able to charge a lot more than if you're reaching out asking people if you can write for them. The complexity of the music is also another common factor. Writing an ambient piece of music might be substantially easier in a lot of ways than writing an action track, or a full piece of orchestra might be a lot harder than writing a solo piano. You can scale that, and I think it's appropriate to do so, especially if you want to help your clients out a little bit, to give them some flexible pricing if it warrants it. The next factor is how tight the deadline is. Naturally, if somebody reaches out last minute and needs something in a day, you have power to charge more than if they don't need it a month from now. The demand is higher, the need is higher, your experience to be able to deliver it faster is obviously going to be higher, and therefore you can charge more. The next factor is how many revisions you anticipate. I think this is a really important one. I think that as you begin to work with people, you begin to get a sense of how specific and particular they are. Hopefully early you can feel that, but sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But if you've worked with a client before and they are very picky, and you do like working with them, but you anticipate a lot of revisions, make sure you charge a little extra to make up for that time. You want to make sure that you don't get screwed over by just charging what you think is going to take you 2 hours and then winds up taking you 6. And then the last one, which is probably the most abstract but very important, is how much value the client is getting from your work. What I mean by that is, if you picture a small independent project, maybe a student who just gets out of college and is working on a film for fun, how much value are they getting from original music? Is it just value that's personal value? It's just cool for them? Now think about Apple releasing a new product launch with some cool music track in the background to hype up the launch. It's not just a matter of you anymore or your experience. It's a matter of them and what they're getting in return. Now, the trick to this is you can actually increase people's awareness of the value you provide in conversations or in discussion or making YouTube videos. As you can increase people's perceived value of what you offer them, they will charge you more for it. So we've talked about the different factors that can influence your pricing, but it's all still pretty abstract, right? Like, how do you take all of this, boil it down, and come up with a concrete number? This is where I've worked in some formulas, because I think the very first thing you need to do is to figure out what's the minimum you need to be charging in order to sustain this as a living. So here's how it works. We're gonna start off with what I call the survival formula. The first thing you need to do is figuring out your monthly living expenses. And I mean all of your expenses. It could be your debt, your rent, your food costs, your entertainment costs. Figure out on average what it takes for you to live and survive each month. Once you've figured that out, you need to then figure out how many hours per week you intend on working on music. The reason I haven't made this 40 by default is some people want to work less than 40 hours, some people want to work more, and that'll obviously influence your pricing. And the last thing you're going to need to figure out is how many hours it takes you to write a minute of music. The way I recommend doing that is actually literally getting a stopwatch, writing, stopping it when you've written a minute, and see where you're at. Keep doing that, and eventually you'll get an average. Now, with those three variables, monthly living expenses, hours per week, and how many hours to write a minute of music, here is the formula. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our monthly living expenses, and we're gonna divide that by the hours we work per week times 4.3. 4.3 is just the average weeks in a month. So what we're basically calculating on this section here is our minimum hourly wage to survive. From that point, all we're gonna do is multiply the minimum hourly wage by how many hours it takes us to write a minute of music. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that my monthly living expenses is $2,000. I'm going to divide the 2,000 by my hours worked per week, which let's say it's 40. 40 times 4.3 is gonna be 172. And 2,000 divided by 172 is gonna be roughly $12. What that means is I have to be charging $12 or more per hour in order to survive. The next part of that is how many hours does it take me to write a minute of music? Let's say it takes me 5 hours. 12 times the 5 hours is $60 per minute of music. So I have to make sure I charge a minimum of $60 per minute of music in order to sustain $2,000 a month. Now, $60 is very low. Let me be super clear about that. I'm not recommending you charge that. I'm using this as an example. And I always recommend multiply that final number by 0.5 to count for your profit, which you want to be making profit. You don't want to just break even, and potential revision time. So if you wound up with $60 per minute of music, I would say just charge $90 per minute of music. Make sure you value yourself appropriately. Now again, this is the minimum. It's the minimum. You can obviously scale as you grow, but it gives you a baseline of what you have to be charging. And the reason I do this is because sometimes people charge less than this. Sometimes people think they're not worth as much, or sometimes people don't realize they have to be charging more in order to sustain it as a living. Now let's say you figured out your minimum, you're charging appropriately, and work's starting to pick up. You're actually starting to get people approaching you. You're starting to find more work. You're getting better at what you do. You're getting faster. This is where you can use a much easier formula. I'm calling this the value formula, and it's as simple as this. How much do you want to get paid per hour? And how many hours does it take you to write a minute of music? It's as simple as that. It makes sure that you prioritize your own worth first. Let's say I want to be making $50 per hour, and it takes me 4 hours to write a minute of music. I'm gonna charge $200 per minute. And like I said before, multiply by 0.5 to account for the profit and revision time. So you should charge $300 per minute. $300 per minute. And there you go, that's your rate. You can use either method. You might find that both numbers actually are similar or radically different, and maybe somewhere in between is your answer. But hopefully both of those formulas give you a good reference point for what the bare minimum is that you can charge and what you think you should be charging. Now let's talk about when you pitch your pricing. In any good business, you will have clients that can't afford you. It's just the reality of it. If you walked into a Walmart and something cost $20 and you asked if you could pay for it for $5, what do you think they're gonna say? They're gonna look at you like you're crazy. You have to make sure that you're willing to have clients that can't afford you. It's the only way to grow, only way. And it's very painful because early in our careers, we're used to thinking we should say yes to everything. We should take every gig and be grateful for every opportunity. But you have to get over that mindset of taking everything and saying yes to everything in order to truly flourish. So with that in mind, so you pitch your pricing, they can't afford you, and they don't negotiate. They just say, I can't afford that. Not good. It either means that you're out of their budget, way out of their budget, like so much so they don't want to negotiate it, or it means they're just looking for a cheap option, of which you hopefully don't want to be. I wouldn't want to be the cheap option. So if they can't afford you and they don't negotiate, probably not a good fit. If they can't afford you but they do negotiate, you should ask yourself, do you want the gig? Do you want the gig? Because now you're in a position of power. They're asking you to make a concession for them. If you want the gig, sure, maybe you work with them. You don't have to fix your pricing like a, stone. You can have some leverage if you want to. But if you don't want the gig, be willing to say, I'm sorry, but I can't make that work for that pricing, and be willing to walk away from it. And all of that negotiation power, by the way, is contingent on the fact that you don't need the money. Of course, if you need the money, you don't have this negotiation power because you need the money. You have to say yes to any gig. So hopefully you can find a way slowly but surely, and it takes years to be able to work yourself out of the position of need to the position of power where you can choose to take a gig or not. I have one final thought I'd like to offer to this video, and that is about the idea of value, because ultimately pricing comes down to value. That's all there is to it. Your value is a combination of two things. It's a combination of how someone values you, but it's also a combination of how you value yourself. And both are quite related, actually. If you don't value yourself highly, it becomes difficult for others to value you back, because confidence is infectious and people can feel that. You need to believe that you're worth something as a creative person in this industry. You have to believe that you have something you can offer to people. And if you believe that, you will see a change in how people speak to you. Hold yourself with integrity, hold yourself with respect. Say, I can't do this work at that pricing and do it justice. Watch what happens. People will change. You'll see people talk to you differently. As you increase your self-value, your perceived value of yourself, others will follow in turn. And the other thing I'll say, just charge more with every project. The simple way to earn more money as a composer is charge a little bit more each time. Eventually, you're gonna find an upper limit where people say, I'm sorry, I just can't afford that anymore. And maybe you kind of push down a little bit. And as you get a bunch of yeses, you charge more. It's kind of like this scale that goes like this, or wave. But ultimately, if you continue to charge more, you'll get paid more. And it's as simple as that. Now, I know there are many factors that I addressed here, but I hope that those two formulas were helpful for you as a baseline on what to charge. And I hope you now understand what can influence your pricing as you continue to grow. So thank you as always for watching. Hope you found this helpful. It's a really important subject to me. If you did, you can leave a like, subscribe for more, and buy me a coffee if you'd like in the video description. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you in the next video.